I've come up with a way to solve media bias. This method is a little weird, and it seems like it wouldn't work, but just hear me out for a few minutes. Media bias or fake news has been a relevant problem since the 13th century, for example, when Ramesses the Great depicted scenes of himself smiting his foes during a battle against the Hittite Empire, to the days of yellow journalism and the Spanish-American War, all the way to now, when media bias has become so prevalent that the last 5 US presidents, not to even mention the majority of the previous US presidents, have all complained about bias in the news. Now, in order to effectively combat this bias, it's important to understand how to actually identify it. It's important to point out that reporters are people like us. They're not some separate elitist entity that many of us see them as. Sometimes we tend to over-exaggerate the severity of that bias that we complain about, even if that bias is unintentional or even non-existent. Jonathan Stray wrote a great article analyzing studies that showed the effects of groupthink or mob mentality, which do get in our way when we try to accurately determine the level of bias there is in a particular article or news source. If the media, for example, simply merely references the labels Democrat or Republican, instead of a more inclusive, neutral term like American, the viewer's perception of that story will automatically, subconsciously change, since the viewer will already have pre-existing opinions on each party. Simply referencing political parties can make people enter this groupthink mindset, can make them become more sensitive to whatever follows, and thus gives them the false perception or over-exaggeration of bias. At the same time, we cannot deny that media bias does, in fact, exist. Just a few months ago was President Donald Trump's 2019 State of the Union address, and well, pretty much every single news station covered this. Let's take a look at some coverage from the two most known supposed titans of media bias, CNN and Fox News. Those two have been singled out by their opposing party most to be, I guess, the most biased news source for their respective party. Let's take a look at the coverage of the State of the Union address from both news networks.
Yeah, but that message is only good as the man or woman giving it. And he's completely inauthentic asking for unity when right in the same speech he attacks the Democrat.
Economic policies, free market, capitalism, limited bureaucracy. It worked for Reagan, it worked for Kennedy, and it's working for Trump.
He took everything
Bush.
Obama did to suppress economic growth and replaced it with progressive policies.
The internet was rocked with memes as photoshoppers added things like golden handcuffs.
It's kind of this, you see, it's this extended shoulders up. Now, they're reading a lot into this. Democrats desperate for something good on a good night for the president.
Is that a key connection? Is that key connection based on the facts? Our verdict here, it is at best misleading. The data does not make that connection.
Saw that the Democrat women were up on their feet applauding this. It was unbelievable what he did in that moment. He got everybody together, everybody excited. It was energizing and memorable.
Same event, very different perspectives. In 2016, according to Gallup polling, only 32% of Americans said they have a great amount or fair amount of respect for the media. Those videos we just watched are what we can safely label blatant media bias, and it is a massive problem. Bias exists in many forms. How the context of a story is covered, which side of a controversial topic gets more airtime, how often a particular story is covered, the selection of which stories will be covered. There's concision bias, sensationalism, mainstream bias, speculative contents, and much more. All in all, these biases are all meant to provide a more partisan view of an issue instead of a more balanced one. As we can assume, providing only one side of a story, specifically if it is based in the biases of a certain political party, is dangerous. Democrats feel safe in their CNN coverage while Republicans feel cozy in their Fox News coverage. And the more both watch their respective news organization, the more they blindly reinforce their own partisan beliefs instead of reaching out to the other side. Media bias causes great division within the United States. And despite all the constant technological improvements from the ages where the physical newspaper was prominent, or even the ages of yellow journalism, and despite improvements in communication, transportation, equipment, media bias is still an issue. And it seems like there's very little we can do about it, which is the pessimistic view. It is obvious that every single human being on this planet has a natural bias. There is no competent person alive that doesn't exhibit some form of bias. It is human nature having preferences or biases towards our favorite ice cream or our favorite type of music makes our lives better. So how the heck do we just remove something that is part of us, something that is so natural? We've been asking that question for centuries, and we've gotten no solution. Why? Because it's very difficult, if not impossible, to artificially suppress or control something that is a trait, something that is a part of us. Here's where my idea plays in. Instead of asking how can we eliminate our natural bias, what if we tried asking how can we utilize our natural bias? Think about for a second the trait of greed. Greed was bad for all of human history. People would steal, people would take things from others for themselves in order to satisfy their greed. Greed is still natural in all of us, it hasn't gone anywhere. But instead of attempting to suppress greed, we've created an economy that utilizes greed to serve everyone. We all want money, right? At least, I mean, some of us more than others, but we need some amount of money in order to live a comfortable life. Henry Ford became a billionaire, but only after revolutionizing and transforming the American transportation industry and creating the first car affordable to the middle class, thus improving the lives of everyone. Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world as of right now, became a billionaire not by stealing, but by creating. He created Amazon and next day shipping for prices cheaper than ever before. While greed or money may or may not have been their primary goal, there is no denying that greedy people are motivated by money. And nowadays, they satisfy that greed by working for others, giving their time, creating the next revolutionary product, and improving the lives of everyone and helping everyone instead of just themselves. Greed is inherently bad, but instead of attempting to suppress it, just like we have attempted to suppress human bias, we've utilized greed in order to better humanity. The point is, if we've handled greed so well, something that is natural, something within us, can we not do the same for our inherent human bias? Here is my proposal for all major news sources like ABC, CBS, CNN, Fox, and all others. It is hire an equal amount of open Democrat and open Republican journalists. That's it. Of course, the numbers don't have to be exactly equal, but instead of allowing your reporters to cloak themselves with the false image of neutrality, or claim to be objective journalists, many of which are not in the first place, allow them to be honest about their natural bias, and at the same time, make sure you include reporters with opposing viewpoints, and then allow them to discuss and debate their stances on your news network. I'm calling this idea the Capitalistic Bias Journalism Method, or CBJM. Now, I 100% understand it would not be that simple. There would be many nuances to be addressed about how to actually run a CBJM network, but why do I see so much potential in this? Well, first, it is a new way to address the seemingly unsolvable issue of media bias. Second, networks that take on the CBJM would almost guaranteed see their ratings rise, something that news networks, I assume, care about very, very much. One of the reasons neutral reporting is so difficult to accomplish is that there exists an unfortunate truth, and it is that viewers would much rather watch an interesting personality give their take on a particular issue, say Anderson Cooper or Tucker Carlson on the other side, rather than a neutral reporter giving facts and statistics while trying to remain unbiased. We are not statistic-eating robots, and there's nothing we can do about that except for trying to find ways to accommodate for our humanness. My method does have an incentive for news networks. Not only does the CBJM promote neutrality through debate, but it also promotes good ratings through the interesting or sometimes even fiery debates that would occur with interesting personalities. In our current news system, it seems like you can only have bias with personality or neutrality with little personality. With my method, you can more easily have the better side of both. I should mention that in no way does the CBJM, or do I want my method to be enforced by the government. That would be absolutely absurd. I simply believe that if news networks want to strive for neutrality, this idea just might work. It seems odd that promoting bias can actually promote neutrality, but think about it. If a journalist at CNN, let's say, knows that something he or she is about to say is unfair or just simply biased, that journalist nowadays can more easily get away with saying it within the echo chamber some news networks tend to exhibit. With the CBJM, by always having their opposition at the table, journalists will pay more attention to facts, keeping their colleagues and themselves in check, making sure their opposition gives correct information while also striving to stay correct themselves. In this popular phrase, I won't say enemies, but keeping the people you disagree with closer to you than the people you always agree with might just be the mindset, the foundation that opens an entirely new era in the world of journalism. One more thing, in case you have the perception that making Democrats and Republicans work together on a daily basis would end in chaos, keep in mind that these journalists, all of them, are trained to write and speak with neutrality. They wouldn't all of a sudden abandon all of their journalistic integrity, become some alt-right, alt-left psychopath now that they can be more honest about their views. Not only would that reflect poorly on their position, but these journalists they're people too. They have empathy. They can respect the other side despite their disagreements. Unfortunately, we are at a point where we believe that debate or discussion between two members of opposing political parties is bound to end in aggression or even unpleasantry. If we want a less divisive, a less polarizing environment, it's absolutely crucial that we talk to each other, at least more often. We need less anger and more seeking to understand. That is one of the main aspects of my idea. Just like we have taken our natural greed and used it instead of suppressing it, the Capitalistic Bias Journalism Method does just that, but with our innate human bias. Just like in courtrooms, places that are a symbol of neutrality, judges rely on the prosecution and the defense, two opposing sides that give the best possible take on the issue, in a biased manner, of course, to best produce the most fair, the most unbiased resolution. Let me know if you support my idea, and of course let me know if you have any concerns. Addressing potential problems with this system will only make this plan better, I hope. Let's see if anything will be done about media bias. Let's see if it will slowly alleviate if we continue following the path we've been on for centuries. If the problem does go away, hey, I mean, I'll be genuinely glad, but if it doesn't, there is an alternate solution, one that, in my biased opinion, could not only transform journalism for the better, but also initiate a spirit of bipartisanship within the American people. Thanks for watching.